Chapter 5, Little Green Men. Luckily for Isabel and everyone else in the courtyard of the hospital, the afternoon was fairly warm. She'd stayed in the shade, not talking to anyone, watching new people arrive and others leave as they turned green and were taken inside. Isabel had no idea how the hospital was going to handle so many people, though thankfully the victims really didn't seem sick beyond their skin color. More than likely, they were just being taken to large rooms where they too were just sitting around. For the moment, the new arrivals into the courtyard had slowed to a few every half hour, while those turning green seemed to have picked up speed, with some people getting upset when the skin color change started and others were just being resigned to joining their friends and loved ones inside. Every so often, she had checked her own skin, half expecting it to start to turn green at any moment. So far, it stayed its normal color. Over the last hour, she had tried to make a call on her cell phone a half dozen times with no luck. She was worried about running her cell phone battery down, so she had forced herself not to try anywhere near as many times as she had wanted to. As two soldiers escorted an elderly woman who was a fine shade of forest green inside the hospital, Isabel decided she needed to try again. She needed to talk to someone, and even though there were hundreds around her, she didn't dare say anything to any of them. This time, inside of the all circus busy recording, a phone on the other side rang. For a moment, she couldn't even remember what number she dialed. She was so surprised. Then Michael answered in his gruff voice. "Crash down." "Michael, it's Isabel," she said, trying to keep her voice low enough so that others around her wouldn't hear. Only one couple glanced towards her and then looked away. "You all right?" he asked, clearly happy to hear from her. "We've been worried about what happened to you." "I'm trapped in the quarantine at the hospital." "Oh, no," Michael said. "You're not green, are you?" "Not yet," Isabel said, although I think it might only be a matter of time. "Why?" Michael asked. "People are dropping like flies," she said, although that's not the right analogy because they don't really seem sick. "People are still turning color there," he asked. Yes, she said. "Why, aren't they doing it there?" "There's no one in the crash zone except the group, and after the first wave, none of us changed." "If you're not green, how'd you end up in the hospital?" "My date turned green during the movie," Isabel said. "Knowing the guys you go out with," Michael said, "that could be an improvement. Here's Max." She heard him tell Max where she was and the effect she had on dates. Then her brother's strong voice filled her ear. "Are you all right? Any problems?" "I'm fine," she said. "I don't know what else to do to calm Rob down, so I brought him here. They took him somewhere and put those of us who haven't turned green yet in a courtyard in the middle of the place." "And you're not allowed to leave?" "Not that I can tell," she said, glancing over at the armed guard on the nearest door. "Soldiers are keeping us locked up pretty tight. They're watching us pretty close. They're letting us go to a nearby restroom area, but that's about all. You have any idea what's going on?" "Actually," Max said, "Liz just discovered that the color people are turning is related to the contents of the cave." "What cave?" she asked, just a little too loud. A lot of people turned and looked at her. Then she remembered. "Oh, are you sure?" "Yeah," Max said. Isabel shook her head. She couldn't believe that these people were turning green because of the melted blue crystals in the cave from weeks earlier. "I don't want to talk too much over the phone," Max said. "Just say that the contents of the cave went into part of the city's water supply when it melted." "Oh, no," she said softly. "Another problem," Max said, "is that the blue cells causing the problem can't be seen unless one of us is nearby to illuminate them." "You're kidding," she said. "I wish I was," Max said, "so don't go near any labs there in the hospital." "I really wasn't planning on it," she said. "I didn't say in, Isabel," Max said. "I said near." She froze, then looked across the courtyard. There was no way to tell if any windows looking down on her was a lab. "How close do I have to be?" she asked. "Pretty close. I was in the room when Liz saw the change, but it went away as I walked into the hall." "Thank God for that," Isabel said. She would probably be all right in the courtyard then, but if the army happened to take her into a lab and noticed her presence could show cells in other people's bodies, they would start tests on her in a heartbeat. "Get out of there as soon as you can." "Believe me, Max, I would if I could," she whispered, staring at the elderly couple closest to her. They didn't seem to be hearing anything. She glanced around behind her to make sure no one was there either. She was clear, unless someone was tapping the cell phone conversation, and she couldn't imagine why anyone would do that at this point. They were too busy gathering green people to monitor the airways. Isabel suddenly processed what Max said about his presence illuminating the blue cells. How are the doctors going to be able to find a cure for this if they can't see the problem that's causing it? Max was silent for a long moment and said, I don't know. Again, silence. What should I do? She asked, glancing around once more to make sure no one was watching. They weren't. Everyone's attention was focused across the courtyard where a woman starting to turn green was getting hysterical, fighting and shouting at a man trying to keep her calm and lead her towards the door. 2 guards rushed to her and within a few seconds had her headed for the door, protesting every step of the way. Clearly some people did not handle situations like this well. Isabel had been in more dangerous situations than this one, but she was still amazed she was as calm as she was. Just stay out of everyone's way, Max said. That's not a problem, she said, at least at the moment. I don't know how we get you out of there, but if we can figure out a way, we'll try. Let's hope we don't have to. Thanks, she said. Are you sure you're all right? Max asked. For now, I'm fine. Just tell Mom and Dad where I am. I will, Max said. Call me if anything happens. If I can get through, Isabel said. Yeah, Max said after a moment. Take care. You too, she said. The line went dead, and again she felt very alone in the crowd, filling the middle of the hospital, in the middle of the city. It took Max a few minutes to tell the rest of the group where Isabel was. Then he went down into the back room of the restaurant to call home to let his mom know that they were both all right. Luckily, so were his parents. No color change. But after the phone call, his stomach didn't let him believe his own lie to his mother. They were far from all right. Isabel was in the middle of a military-run quarantine, the worst place an alien in hiding could be, and the reason people were turning green was because of alien cells. Somehow he needed to get Isabel out of that hospital, but he had no idea how to go about that, any more than he had no idea how to stop the spread of the alien cells and turn people back to their normal colors. He came out of the back room of the crash down just as Michael headed to the stairs with a glass of water filled from the counter sink. What are you doing? Max asked, following him. Testing the water from the different taps, Michael said, just to make sure the crash down water is clean. Good idea, Max said. Has it been so far? 100% pure city water, Michael said. No alien cells. Upstairs, Max watched as Liz put a drop of the water from the glass on the slide and studied it. After a moment, she said, clean? For the moment, Tess said from where she was standing near the window. We don't know if those cells will spread to the water supply. She's right, we don't, Max said. I'm not really caring about water right now, Maria said, or where it drips or flows. How about finding a way to get these cells out of my body? No one said a word. Max had nothing he could say. The silence is sure encouraging, Alex said. Since I can see the cells, Liz said, I'll try working on it, but somehow we're going to have to tell the scientists how to see the problem cells. She looked at Max. He knew she was right, but like the other problems, he had no idea how to go about that without blowing their cover. Thanks for trying, Maria said to Liz. You'd think by now I'd start getting used to this color, but it isn't happening. It clashes with everything. Only you would think about fashion at a time like this, Alex said. Maria frowned at him. If there's a chance I'm going to be this color for some time, what else is there to think about? And that's what I like about you, Michael said next to Maria, knowing how to get to the real problems. In the meantime, Max said, trying to break up the coming argument, we need water table maps. Library, Liz said. They aren't on the internet? Alex asked. No, Liz said. There are certain things governments don't put on the internet, believe it or not, because they're afraid someone will tamper with the water supply, Michael said. I guess, Liz sighed. Just not like this. Max glanced around the group. Alex and Maria had to stay hidden since they were green, and he wanted Liz working to see if she could find something to solve the blue cell problem. So that left him and Michael and Tess to do all the legwork. Looks like we're going to the library, Max said to Michael. Why does it take 2 of you to go to the library? Alex asked. Max smiled at Liz. Considering everything that's going on, it might be closed. Oh, got it, Alex said. Max turned to Tess. Would you go talk to Sheriff Valenti, tell him what we know so far, and ask him to come here? I think we're going to need his help as well. Maybe getting information to the doctors in the hospital. And tell him to not drink the water. Tess nodded. I'll check at home first. Kyle might know where he's gone. Don't go near the hospital, Michael said. We don't want 2 of us trapped there. Not a chance, Tess said. With that, she headed out the door. Max watched her go, then turned to Liz. You need anything to help you? Nothing I could think of at the moment, she said, except more skin from Alex. Not on your light, he said. Get it from Maria. You big baby, Maria said. They were still arguing when he and Michael took the stairs down into the crashdown, 2 at a time. Liz spent the half hour while Michael and Max were looking for maps at the library, looking through the microscope. At first, she used samples of her skin next to Maria's, then she finally talked Alex into a fresh sample and put his skin cells beside the ones from Maria. It was then that she discovered exactly what she had been afraid she might find. She learned in class that the thin top section of the human skin, called the epidermis, includes a thin protective layer of mostly dead cells that flake off when rubbed or scraped. The next layer are the most active cells, and the lower layer of the epidermis is where the few melanocyte pigment-producing cells were, sending the color up into the second layer. Human skin is constantly being replaced with new cell formation as the older cells die and move to the top layer to be flaked off. And that includes the melanocyte cells, both the ones that create the skin color and the ones at the bottom of the hair follicles that create hair color. Comparing the samples from her two friends, Liz noted that Alex's melanocyte cells had adapted more than Maria's cells. In Alex, new cells were forming a tighter and more permanent bond with the alien blue cell. Any luck? Max said, as he and Michael came back in. Michael was carrying a rolled up map that Liz knew wasn't allowed to be checked out of the library. She would make sure it got back after this was all over. She hasn't said a word since she tortured me 15 minutes ago, Alex said. Max moved over to where Liz sat. You don't look like you have good news. I'm not sure yet, Liz said. About what? Michael asked. Well, first off, Liz said, on the last scraping of skin for Maria, I got deep enough to get some hair follicles. The color-producing cells there are also covered with the blue cells, or at least they were green in color. I can make sure now that you are here. You mean my hair is going to turn green, too? Maria demanded. It does seem like it's going to spread to your hair, too, Liz said, giving her friend a weak smile and shrugging. Sorry. Michael snorted. Not funny, alien boy, Maria said, glaring at him. That's not the only problem I'm seeing, Liz said. Now that we've got Max here, let me check it one more time. Max nodded. Liz went back to staring at the two samples of skin under her microscope. Alex had turned green before Maria, and now that the blue cells were visible with Max and Michael nearby, it was clear. As the cells reproduced in the skin, the bond between the alien cell and the pigment-producing human cells became permanent. She looked up at Max, then at Maria and Alex. Spit it out, girl, Maria said. My skin's green, my hair's about to turn green. I can take it. The human body replaces its surface layer of skin every 15 to 30 days, Liz said. So we have to wait that long to get back to normal color? Alex asked. I suppose it could be worse. Liz shook her head. Worse? Maria asked. Liz nodded. The alien cells seemed to be bonding permanently with the new pigment-producing cells being produced, altering them in some fashion. The silence of the room was powerful and heavy. Liz could feel the weight of the knowledge pounding down on her friends like a hammer. I might be wrong, she said softly, but she knew she wasn't. And if you're not, Max said, how long until this change is permanent? It's starting now, she said. The skin cells are being replaced every minute of every day. So every hour, every day that we wait is going to make this harder to change, Max said, his gaze staring at the floor and not at her. She knew the pressure this put him under and the decisions he was going to have to make shortly, and she didn't like it any more than he did. Are you telling me that if we don't find an answer soon, Maria said, standing and looking directly at Liz, then I'm going to be green-skinned with green hair the rest of my life? This is not funny, Alex said, not one bit. No kidding, Maria said, the anger right at the surface of her words. Max glanced up at her, then at Alex. We'll find an answer before that happens. Yeah, right, Alex said, with a high school science student in a home microscope. If we have to give information to the scientists at the hospital and the base, we'll find a way to do that, Max said. And expose us? Michael asked. Max glanced at Michael, then looked at Liz. We'll do what we have to do to reverse this. The meaning of that statement again dropped the room into a deep, pressure-filled silence. Liz knew Max was telling the truth. If he had to risk himself and their cover to stop this, he would. She knew that, but first they needed to try to solve it on their own. Give me a chance first, Liz said. I need a skin sample from you, Max, and some blood. He nodded and sat down on the bed beside Alex, rolling up his sleeve. Oh, this is going to hurt you more than it does me, Alex said, smiling at Max. I'm not done with you yet, mister, Liz said, smiling at her tall green friend. And if you're not careful with Max, next time I'm going to find a really tender spot. Not funny, Alex said. There's nothing funny about this, Maria said, again sitting at Liz's dressing room table and staring into the mirror. Green hair is so last decade. Green hair is so last decade. That's funny. Chapter 6. Outside Liz's bedroom window, the evening was slowly fading into a beautiful spring sunset. She had started out the day worrying about her job and how she could avoid Max. She had known that he wanted to have a talk about their relationship. She wanted to avoid it. Ever since future Max had shown up warning her about the apocalypse, she'd been trying to keep her distance, but it had been hard. Most of her so wanted things to return to normal with him, to have a special relationship between her and Max. But every time that started, the Max from the future's words seemed to break in, haunting her. And with everything going on lately, and the arrival of Tess, they just hadn't spent much time together. Not as much as she had wanted, which was why she'd agreed to spend time with him tonight when he had asked. But that was before everything was crazy and people started turning bright green. Now it looked that unless she found something to solve this problem quickly, her two best friends were going to be green-skinned for the rest of their lives, and they'd have a lot of company in Roswell. And if she couldn't find an answer, then Max might have to figure out a way to tip off the medical specialist at the hospital about the presence of the alien cell, and that would jeopardize his safety, as well as Tess and Michael and Isabel's. Everything about this day had just turned bad. Now Michael had gone back downstairs, and Tess hadn't returned yet with Sheriff Valenti. Max had the map of the area water table spread out on the floor and was studying it. Maria had her head down on the dressing room table, her eyes shut. "I'm going to open my eyes, and this will all have been a nightmare," she said. Liz watched as Marie opened her eyes slowly and stared right at her green-skinned arm. "I'm still asleep." She snapped her eyes closed. "I wish I was," Alex said, his leg bouncing in a nervous habit he had picked up lately. He lay back on the bed, his leg thumping, not stopping. Liz went back to studying the skin samples under her microscope. She had put Max's on the left and Maria's on the right. With Max in the room, the blue cells were illuminated in Maria's green skin. It was clear that the alien cells were bonding deeper and deeper with the human cells. And in just this sample alone, there was a few new pigment-producing cells that looked like a permanent combination of the melanocyte cell and the alien blue cell. That wasn't a good sign at all. "Max, could you go downstairs for a few minutes?" Liz asked. "I want to test to see if your blood illuminates the cells." Max nodded, rolled up the map of the water tables, and headed out the door. She waited until he was down the stairs, then pulled the slide out of the microscope and keeping her hand braced against the edge of a book, she used a pin tip that she had dipped into Max's blood sample to touch Maria's skin sample. It left only a tiny red dot. She quickly put the slide back into position and studied it. Her first thought was success. She could see the blue alien cells with just a little of Max's blood on the slide. Then it dawned on her what else she was seeing. In all her days of science classes and staring through microscopes at cells, she never imagined she would ever witness what she was seeing at that moment. A few cells in Max's blood were being drawn actively, like magnets, to the blue cells in Maria's skin. They were pushing other skin cells aside to get there. And when Max's cells finally reached the blue alien cell, they broke the blue cell apart on contact, leaving the normal human melanocyte cell. And then the same cells seemed to be drawn to the next closest alien blue cell, which also was broken apart. "Amazing," she said softly. When she had put Max's blood with the skin sample, it was only in hopes that it would light up the blue alien cells. That way she had hoped they could just anonymously give some blood samples to the doctors at the hospital to help them find a cure. She never expected to have this happen. Within 15 seconds, the blue cells in the entire skin sample were gone completely, including the ones that she had thought would be permanent. She looked up at Maria, head still down on the dressing table, then over at Alex on the bed. Could it be possible that Max's blood was the cure? She studied the skin sample again. There wasn't a sign of blue alien cells anywhere. She stood and went to the top of the stairs. "Max, come back up for a minute." "Okay," Max shouted from below. "Man," Michael's voice also floated up, "you sure let that woman boss you around. Right now she's the only one who has any clue to what's going on." Max's voice was coming closer. "Yeah," Michael said, as faintly as before, "and it's going to get us all in trouble, or maybe even killed. People can stay green, Maxwell." "What if it has other effects, Michael?" "You're going to do the hero thing again, aren't you?" Michael asked. "Max," Liz called out again, wanting this discussion to end. "Only if it's necessary, Michael," Max said. "Yeah," Michael said, "but your definition of necessary is much broader than mine." Liz sighed. She hoped Michael would reconsider that opinion. After all, Maria was one of the people who had turned green, and no matter what he said, he really cared about Maria. Liz went back in and sat down, again studying the skin sample. It was as if she had left it, looking normally human. No alien cells at all. What did you discover? Max asked as he entered the room. For a moment she kept her eyes locked on the microscope to see if any blue cells appeared when he was close by. Nothing. Great. She looked up from the microscope. I need you to watch something. What? Alex asked, sitting up and scooting the edge of the bed with interest. Did you find something? Maybe, Liz said. Well, tell me when you can turn me purple, Maria said, standing. I'll be locked in the bathroom sobbing. She headed out and down the hallway, but Liz was too busy to try to stop her. She took out the slide she had been studying and slipped in the slide with Alex's skin sample on it. She quickly adjusted it, made sure the blue alien cells were clearly visible, and then scooted back and pointed for Max to look. He leaned in and stared at the slide, then nodded and stepped back, a puzzled frown on his face. I don't see anything different from before. I know, she said, but wait a minute. She took the slide with Alex's skin sample, touched a pin-tip amount of Max's blood to one edge, and slid it back into position. She made sure it was focused, watching the cells in Max's blood attack the blue cells, then slid back for Max to take her position. Now look. He again leaned forward, putting his eyes against the microscope. After a moment, his body got tense as he watched what was happening. Would someone please tell me what's going on? Alex asked. This is driving me nuts. Max stepped back, a look of excitement in his eyes, a smile covering his face. Take a look, he said. Alex moved off the bed and leaned over the microscope, careful not to touch or bump anything. Max just smiled at Liz and said nothing. Liz couldn't help but smile back. Maybe, just maybe, they had found some kind of solution to the problem. But the solution was Max's blood, and that brought up an entire new set of issues and problems. Wow, Alex said, turning and looking at Liz. Tell me what I just saw is Max's blood cells destroying the blue alien cells on contact. That's what it looks like to me, Liz said, smiling at the excitement on her green friend's face. How? Alex asked. I have no idea, Liz said. Something in Max's blood that makes him immune to the material from the cave. That immunity attacks and destroys the invading cells. So now what? Max asked. I suppose we need to test it, Liz said. Max nodded and turned to look at Alex. You need a volunteer? Alex said, his green hand and arm shooting in the air like he wanted to answer the question in class. Let me be the first to stand in line, raise my hand, whatever. Liz nodded. You all right with this, Max? I think so, Max said. Anything to solve this problem. Liz nodded. They needed to figure out if this was going to work, then deal with the problems of the cure being blood from the aliens later. Get a large glass of water from downstairs, she said to Max, and a pitcher of water as well. Max nodded and ran for the stairs. She picked up the small tube with Max's blood she had collected from him earlier and looked at it. I think we need to test the skin method first. Alex held out his arm. Drop it on here. Liz shook her head. No, I want to dilute the blood in water first. I want to find out how little of Max's blood this is going to take. We'll work up a full drop of blood on the skin if we have to. Makes sense to me, he said. From the way those cells were attacking on the microscope slide, it might not take many. That's my hope. Max came back with Michael following him. Max had the glass of water, Michael the pitcher of water. So, Michael said, is it true? Max's blood is all powerful? Let's hope, Liz said. Max handed her the glass. She carefully dropped in one very tiny drop of Max's blood, just about as much as she had put on the slide. You think that's going to be enough? Max asked. I'm still not buying that your blood is the cure, Michael said. We don't know for sure that it is yet, Liz said. That's what we're testing. Michael only shrugged. I'll believe it when I see it. She stirred the glass of water with a pencil end. She had put so little of the blood in it, the water wasn't even pink. Maybe she should put more in? She stared at the perfectly clear-looking water. No, she needed to start as light as possible and see how strong the attraction of Max's blood cells were to the alien cells. She knew that in that tiny pin drop there were thousands and thousands of cells. Now she had to test if just a few thousand cells in a few drops would make a difference on a body full of hundreds of thousands of blue cells replicating. Ready, Alex? She asked. He nodded. This can't hurt worse than taking the skin samples. We don't know that, Max said with mock seriousness. Not funny, Alex said, holding out his arm. Liz took the end of the pencil she had used to stir the glass, dipped it into the treated water, and pulled it out and let a few drops land on Alex's arm. That's it? He asked, staring at the 3 or 4 drops on his green skin. More than likely, we're going to need more, Liz said, but let's just wait and see, shall we? Better to test from weak to strong than the other way, Max said. Especially when it's your blood we're talking about, Michael said. Liz couldn't tell if he was serious about that or not. So if this works, Alex said, staring at the water drops on his arm, what should I expect? Liz shrugged. I honestly don't know. The alien cells cause a change in the pigment producing cells in your skin. If those alien cells are destroyed, it's going to take a while for the new pigment to be produced and replace the green. It didn't take long for me to turn green, Alex said. Remember? Not once the process started, Liz said. That's true. But when did you take a drink of water this morning? Right before I came into the restaurant, Alex said. Maybe an hour at most before my color changed. Then this might take that long as well, Liz said. Or maybe a lot longer. Or maybe not at all, Michael said. Liz nodded. Maybe. She was starting to doubt doing the test with only a few drops at first. Maybe it would have been smarter to try the first one full dose and not wait. Now only time would tell. It's chapters 5 and 6.